So Harsha, there's a lot of stuff going on. I read your guys' blog about, the implications of COVID-19 when we kind of first came out in March. You guys posted an incredible resource and took a really, really objective and clinical, I would say, view of COVID-19. So keeping up with those, up to date with the current opportunities and the challenges with the economy, with the health crisis, is one thing, but also pairing that back to commercial real estate is another. So tell me how you're kind of going through the thought process of staying most up to date with what's going on with our economy, with COVID, and then how that affects commercial real estate.
It's a very loaded question. I'm going to try to break it up.
It's super loaded.
Especially loaded because I come from a medical background. Prior to the whole real estate entrepreneurial ventures, primarily I used to call myself a physician scientist. I authored about more than 100 research papers in international publications, and that's kind of previously was my name to fame was, he's an author of multiple journals. So what my skill set is I do systematic reviews. I look at evidence, I look at data, and I kind of summarize it into a digestible piece of information. So when this whole COVID thing came up, there were all these different data points. We didn't know what to make out of it. So I spent probably about a week to 10 days to go over all those data points and try to make my own assessments of things, so to speak. So, and the article that you're mentioning to was a result of that systematic review that I did. I mean, it's not going to go away. Like, I wish it does, but it's going to stay here until we have some sort of an effective vaccine, which might be early next year or mid next year, whenever it comes out. But when we talk about the real estate implications of it, I still, personal opinion, I still feel like we are in the beginning of whatever effects are going to pan out in the real estate world, meaning there has been so much anticipation that, the prices are going to be affected or something's going to happen. But so far, I haven't seen not even a slightest of a change in the pricing or maybe people are losing jobs, but I feel like there's been enough support or buffer in the community that everything is holding stable. Now, is that going to be the case over the next 6 months? I don't know.
Yeah.
And when it comes to, do I want to make a bet and get involved in something big? Yes and no. I believe there is an opportunity because whenever there is like a risky situation, that's when like the real players come out and like they know how to assess the situation and they do good things. So it's a conflicting kind of situation to be in. As a medical professional, yes, I want COVID to go away, but on the real estate front, I was like, well, I don't know if the prices are going to go down with the COVID. So
I know.
So
everybody thought
it's a tough situation. So overall, like I know you kind of read our newsletter, and we've been looking at mostly low income housing. And I know you asked me on the email what my definition for low income. I didn't have a chance to reply to that. Anything that is in the zone of like if a single family or like a 1-bedroom home or a studio, if it rents for less than $750 or $800, that in our opinion would be able to withstand the job losses, even though people trickle down from good looking A-class apartments to B-class. Eventually there's going to be some people settling down at the low income housing level because that's always your safe zone, in my opinion. So and again, I'm not really sure if that's how it's going to pan out. There might be a situation where everything just is fine, everybody continues to make money and nothing's going to change, but we're just trying to assess and evaluate the situation and kind of be prepared in that direction.
Yeah. That's a good response. And I think that the reason I asked about the low income housing question is because there's a difference between actual low income housing tax credit developments that are put under a LURA, right? The land use restriction, and you have to have affordable rents in there and voucher tenants, in those properties. And then also what other people maybe call workforce housing or affordable housing. And so we really, really like a very specific neighborhood in Kansas City that we are actually raising a fund for. And it's in the northeast of Kansas City. We're raising a fund to go, do projects in that area. And it's a lot of them are these affordable housing projects, right? I mean, we bought a 40-unit apartment complex that is a low-income housing tax credit development, and that LURA burns off this December. But, I'm a very big proponent of, especially with times like this, is, it's not a bad thing to have the government paying your rents, or at least a portion of your rents. And so the new project that we just put under contract, there'll be a lot of voucher tenants, either paid from nonprofit organizations here in the city, or potentially doing some Section 8 and other voucher programs in those properties. And everybody's always asking me, aren't you scared or worried about Section 8 tenants? And I'm like, what you don't know is you actually have an opportunity to screen those Section 8 tenants as well, So if you have a property manager, and I say screen lightly, but what I mean by that is you have a property manager who has been managing that type of asset for a long period of time, they know what to look for when those folks come in and apply for being a tenant in one of your buildings. And so even in the subsegment of Section 8 tenants, there are opportunities to find, there's levels, there's people who are not going to pay rent, or they're going to, really be a tenant in your building. And there's folks that are really trying to make it, they've got a family, they're trying to put food on the table, and they're working. And so I love it. I'm really excited about, continuing to do affordable housing projects in the historic Northeast of Kansas City. And I know that you guys are focused on the mobile home parks and affordable housing projects. So I think you share some of that same sentiment, I think, especially, in times like we're in right now.
And I think these sort of projects act as a very good hedge against your regular midtown sort of apartments, which are high-end boutique apartments. So it acts as a good leverage point where you can okay, I've already invested a bunch of money into these sort of big projects. Let me do affordable housing. So if one goes up, hopefully the other one should be stable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that from a physician's standpoint. I have a question for you. I think you're going to like this one. What's the best advice that you've ever received as an investor?
As an investor, there was a time about 3 years ago, I was reading, not doing. And there was a mentor of mine who said, I think you've read more than what you need. You need to go pick up a small project and do it. You would probably learn a lot more from that small project doing it, as opposed to sitting down 1 year and reading it. So I think taking action is the biggest lesson that I've been taught and recommended by a couple of mentors of mine. So, and I think that is a big difference between people who are smart and who actually end up doing things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always tell folks that knowledge is not power. Knowledge is potential power. Knowledge plus massive strategic action is power. And what I love about your approach, I mean, you're this author of all of these, distinguished articles and journals and things like this. So you obviously do the research, but then you go figure out, okay, well, how do I connect with the right folks to actually take the action that I need to take that next level? But you mentioned the mentors. Do you have any tips or tricks on how folks can find the right mentor, or maybe even how did you come into contact with your mentors?
Mostly, we used to go by location. I was living in Chicago for a bit, and then I knew a physician that I was kind of, who was an acquaintance, and I started to kind of shadow him in his clinic. And the more I got to know him, he owned a bunch of real estate all across the suburbs of Chicago. And then you kind of develop a conversation and a kind of a habit of asking them what they do, and then you get genuinely indulged in their conversations. And if anyone's doing something right, especially from a mentor standpoint, they're always very excited to share their good projects. You barely get a no from them if you genuinely go to them and ask them, hey, I think you're doing an amazing job. How do I get, or at least get started in this direction? They would sit down with you and spend hours with you to kind of tell you what they did and how they did. So from that perspective, I think just making an effort and trying to, it doesn't take too much effort. It just connections and connections of connections. That's where you can just start with. And as opposed to online, I know a lot of people are fans of going to the forums and talking and but in my opinion, online communications have a barrier at some point where that you cannot go beyond certain level of getting to know a person. I think the best way is kind of old school way of picking up the phone and trying to arrange for a meeting and sit down for a coffee. And what you can get from that sort of encounter is much more than online encounters.
Yeah, I love that. Harsha, I've never asked you this question. This is not something I ask my regular guests, but is your family here in the United States or are they back in India?
My parents are back home in India. My younger brother is here. I have like 20 other first cousins who are all here, either as physicians or engineers.
Yep.
I'm the oddball in the family who's not primarily focused on only W-2. I'm the kind of, they look at me like, oh, I don't know what's wrong with this guy. He's a doctor, but he wants to do something else.
Oh, that's hilarious.
I think that's a very typical Indian mentality, though. Meaning, as long as you have some sort of a degree, the expectation is that you excel in the job that you do.
Yeah.
And that's your life.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I'm okay with that. But I feel like if I am able to do something more to kind of make me more happy with my job, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And real estate gives me that freedom where it's like, it can help me be a better doctor.
You know what? I have to tell you that over probably 75% of my clients and investors are first generation, Americans, or, their family are still maybe in some part of Asia or India or somewhere else. And so I just love my job because I'm able to get in the mindset of somebody who, you just came to school here,
Right.
I mean, you weren't born here. You
Right.
came to school here and you started reading books. You had to learn a new language. I mean, that's a whole thing in and of itself. And I'm just going to say,
I'll give you a surprising fact. Sorry to cut you off.
that's
So
okay.
growing up in school in India, any kid that goes to kindergarten, so the way the languages are set up in India, just like America has English, in India, in kindergarten, you have Hindi, which is the national language of
Right.
India. And then every state in India has their own language.
I know. That's crazy.
So you learn the state language, you learn the national language, and then you learn English. So in kindergarten, a 3-year-old kid ends up learning 3 different sets of alphabets.
Man. You know what?
So
I have to say, I mean, this you hear it here first. This is Logan Freeman, an American tried and true to say that Americans are lazy. We have other folks. We have other folks learning 3 alphabets in kindergarten. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, this is just, and not everybody is lazy. But when I think about this, I relate this back to David Goggins' 40% rule. And, that means that, when you think that you've hit kind of a physical or mental barrier, mostly physical, your mind is basically protecting you. It's saying, you know what, you need to slow it down. You need to take, that next rep off. You need to back off a little bit. And studies have shown that you've really only tapped in about 40% of your capacity. Same thing, right? It's the same thing. We are not engaging all of our brains to the fullest potential, and you can do more, you can learn more, and you can be more if you set your mind to it. And I just love it because I get to spend so much time with folks that are in the same shoes as you, that are doctors, they're software engineers, they're other types of engineers, and man, it just blows me away. So
one of my mentors, like, I don't know if it was his own quote or he read it somewhere. He said, exhaustion is a very subjective feeling.
That's right. Subjective, not objective, subjective. That is,
if you really want it that bad, it doesn't come in the way. You can go ahead and do it.
Man, I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This is a very social show. Harsha, this is your opportunity to promote somebody that you might think would be a good fit to come on the show and share their story. So what other successful investors or a business owner like yourself should be on the Live Free Investors podcast?
Did you ever have Ford on the show?
Ferd's already been on the show.
There we go.
Yep, Ferd's been on.
Ford's been on. I just can't think of, majority of the people that I know are like people that I know through you and Ford and Paul. Did you ever invite Paul?
Not yet.
There we go. Paul Nagoka.
You got it. Get Paul on the show.
I know. Sure. Yeah. So I know he kind of rebranded his whole online company and named it Red, and that looks pretty cool. So yeah, it's been a while. I kind of caught up with him, so
sure.
We'll have to kind of speak with him once in a while. So yeah, so that's good.
Awesome. Okay. You've mentioned this, and this is the last question. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but my whole brand is about doing things that are going to allow you to live free, right? That's my, Live Free Investments is on my mug. It's on the back of my phone.
Yeah.
it's everywhere. It's on cheesy little things that I have in my office. So what is the best way on a daily basis that you live free, Harsha?
What does that mean? Meaning, I need some sort of elaboration of that question.
Yeah, it just
Right.
means it means your ability to make decisions on your own, to live life on your own terms. Maybe a tip or a trick that you do on a daily basis, like Jocko Willink is also always talking about, discipline equals freedom, right? So maybe just something like that you do on a regular basis that helps you create freedom in your life.
Absolutely, great question. So when I first started the whole entrepreneurial investment thing, that was a completely new field. I come from a medical background, 100%. And when you look at it, it looks like this huge elephant of a task to take over and say, oh my God, I have no idea where to start, what to do.
Yep.
I think the determination of how strongly you want it is the first key. And then that translates into, or hopefully it should translate into, small bits and pieces of actionable items on a day-to-day basis. So when you look at the bigger picture, yes, it is overwhelming, but what I plan or always like keep in the back of my mind is, well, one small step at a time. Okay.
Yeah.
If I have to get a real estate deal, first, let me break it down into 5 pieces. Let me first find a good advisor who can tell me how to structure a deal. Let me find a good brokerage.
Yeah.
And then I spend 5 days on finding an advisor and connecting with them. So, having like a persistent flow of actionable pieces of work in as a part of a bigger plan, I think that's what's helped me the most. And I believe that's what will eventually get me to where I want to be, which is have all this extra time to sit down with my patients and talk to them rather than rushing through a 10-minute visit.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Reverse engineer it and break it down into actionable steps. I love it.
Right.
Spoken like a true investor. Harsha, how can we find you? How can all of the listeners reach out to you, connect with you, follow you, get on your newsletter because you're putting out great content?
The best way to reach out to me is my website, www.physicianestate.com. There is a bunch of call to action buttons. If you subscribe on any of them, I will be personally messaging you a newsletter once every month. These are predominantly my thoughts about what's going on in the market and also any investments that we're looking at. So I'm available on my email. I check it probably thrice every day. And that's kind of should be the best way to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. We'll have that linked up so folks can follow you. This is Logan Freeman with the Live Free Investors Podcast, where investors and business owners share investment advice so you too can live free. Make sure to connect and message with myself and with Harsha on LinkedIn today. And Harsha, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Logan. Appreciate it.
Until next time, guys, live free.